Hi, it's Therese and I'm here for Penny Black and it's time to Gimme 5. I've got another 5 cards to share with you today in the same but different sort of style, and today's all about cutting it oddly. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but you can add so much to your cards by just changing up the shape and making it quite unique. So I'm going to start with some no-line colouring, and I'm using my Prismacolor pencils. I've stamped out the lustrous flower on the front of my card, directly on the front of my card, and I have used just a real pale blue ink because I thought that would go well. For some reason I'm into the blues at the moment and I've got blue flowers everywhere. So today I am focusing on blue and mixing it up with a couple of other colours as well. The reason I did choose blue was I knew that the leaves would also, when you colour green on top of blue, it doesn't sort of turn a muddy colour, so I knew that I could go with that on the leaves as well. I feel a little bit rusty when it comes to my Prismacolor penciling, Prismacolor pencil colouring, and I have sort of start to get the hang of it on about this petal. I added way too much colour to the first 2 petals. I sort of forgot to leave a bit of the blue background as the highlights, and I didn't even think to look at the picture on the packet until I kind of got halfway through my colouring. I thought, well, maybe I could have a look, and yeah, it's very different to the flower that I've coloured. But that's the good thing, you can make these flowers your own. They're such beautiful fine line drawings, so really fun to use in so many different ways. And I've got another card coming up today where I use one of these style of images just very differently to this. What I'm doing here is using my pencils to add the depth initially, and then I'm going to come in with my Gamsol and actually smoosh it out and make it look a bit smoother. Often I don't actually come in with the Gamsol when I colour like this, I just use the pencils to blend with themselves, and today it just seemed to work a bit better to come in with the Gamsol. I think it's because I was still adding too much colour, and that just helped take a bit of it away and add some nice shadows. After I've done all the colouring, what I do then is come in with a darker pencil, like this is a black, and add some shadowing. Try not to add all the lines back in, and then I'll also add some details. But you'll see that a little bit in the photos at the end. Alright, so to cut this card oddly, what I'm doing is I'm actually fussy cutting around the edge of this flower completely up to the whole, the way that I angled the flower with the Misty when I was stamping it out. And I used the Misty because I knew that I could restamp the image if I needed to, because I knew it was going to be a light stamping. So it's a good tool for that, and so many other things. So I decided to add some blue cardstock to the inside of my card, and I'm just using my ATG for that. A lot of my sentiments today are die cuts, and I have already die cut them out and popped them up on some fun foam just to save a little bit of time. And this one is called Just For You, and I decided to leave it in white. And that's card number 1. My second card today is called, this stamp is called Tulip Q, and I have used some jet black archival ink because I want to do some watercolouring with my zigs, and this is on regular cardstock, so I don't want to add too much water to these flowers. In fact, I'm only using the markers to blend with themselves, and I find this works really well on a nice smooth cardstock. You just can't add too much of the marker or too much water because your paper will pill. To add the depth, I'm literally just adding some dots of darker colours, like in both the blues and the greens, and then coming back with my lighter colour again, and then smoothing it out. What do you call it? Blending it on the cardstock. So this card is a side fold card, and I am working directly on the card base yet again. You can see where I'm going with this. So to work out where I want to cut the card, I'm just actually doing this visually. I'm not really measuring it. It kind of ends up a square. And then once I marked where I wanted to cut, I did cut it down on my bigger paper trimmer, which cuts 2 pieces of cardstock really easily. And then I'm doing the same thing again. I'm simply fussy cutting around the edges of the flower and up the edge of the card. This time I'm coming in with a piece of pale grey cardstock, and I have cut a little lip. I'm not sure if you can see it, so that it covers the whole card base. I'm adding a white embossed sentiment from Snippets, and this is just on some black cardstock, and a little butterfly that's been die cut from the Flights of Fancy die set, and adding that on with a glue dot. One thing to be aware of when you are writing on a card like this is where you write, so that it doesn't detract from the actual card when it's open. That's just something to be aware of. Alright, so this is the one that's similar to the first card but different. I'm using the Dancing Daisies stamp set, and the ink is called Manganese Blue. It's an archival ink. But rather than stamp in a lighter colour and add all the colour, this time I've actually stamped in a bold colour and only adding some black Prismacolor pencil to add some shading to all the flowers and the leaves. I did toy with the idea of just leaving it plain blue and using the stamped image shadows, which would have looked really pretty as well, but once I started colouring with the black, I knew I just had to go with that because it did add such great details to these flowers, and with minimal effort, I promise. Seriously, it did. Now, I forgot to mention that I did stamp this image directly on the card front again, and that's something that you need to consider when you're colouring and cutting it oddly, because if you don't want Copics colouring and showing through, then pencils are usually a better option. So this card, I want to have a straight line, pretty much to give it a bit more of a modern edge, and I just visually looked at where it would be good on the card front and still fold well, made a couple of pencil marks, and I'm using my craft knife and metal ruler. Now, metal rulers are easier to use your craft knife against and probably a little bit safer, but if you've got a sturdy plastic or wooden ruler, you could probably use that as well. Or any of your tools, if you've got a big trimmer that will fit in, and that's actually probably an easier option. My trimmer's just not big enough. And then all I could do was simply fussy cut the rest of the floral image out, and so half of it's fussy cut and the other half is a bold straight line. I decided to use the grey cardstock on the inside of this card, and if you look closely you can see that little notch in the top of the grey cardstock, so that it covers the whole front of inside of the card and it still folds easily. And on this card I just decided to go with a grey die cut sentiment, and it's from the Dream Big die set, and it's called It's the Little Things, and I did decide to add the tittle to the eye. And that's card number 3. I am adding a few sparkling clear sequins around just to tie all the designs in together as well, and I'm not showing that on the video, but you can see them in the finished cards at the end. So for my next design, I'm stamping, this is one of the flower images from the Flower Medley stamp set, and stamping it in some manganese blue ink on some blue cardstock, so it's tone on tone stamping, and I'm adding some white highlights with a Prismacolor pencil. So nothing fancy here. This is going to go on the inside of the card, so I want to still be able to write on it with a black pen and be able to see the sentiment. So I've die cut this large butterfly, and it's called Swirling Wings, and I've just cut that out of some white cardstock. It's a beautiful intricate butterfly design. I thought it'd be fun to add some gold dots with some deco foil, and I just used that deco foil pen and ran that through my laminator with some gold foil over top. Originally I was going to go with a sort of a gold highlight on all the cards, but in the end this is the only card that ended up with any gold on it. I was able to cut down the whole card so it's a top fold square card, and then I just eyeballed it and chomped a bit off the left hand edge at the front. Just a very simple way to cut it oddly without over fussying it with such a busy background and a pretty butterfly. I have added a gold confetti heart to the middle of the butterfly with glue dot, and the sentiment came from the same Flower Medley stamp set, and I just stamped that with some black ink. Now we're on to the final card already. This card is actually, the whole card base is pale grey. It's quite a thick cardstock, this one, so it holds up really well on its own. And I decided to stamp it with some Onyx black ink because I don't want anything to be showing through on the inside, so I'm sticking with that today and colouring directly on the card front with my Prismacolor pencils. And these pencils work really well on coloured cardstock, and when I use them on coloured cardstock, usually I don't come in with my Gamsol. I just actually use the pencils to blend themselves. So I'll start with the lighter colour, bring the shading in, and then blend it back out with the lighter colour. I'm trying not to overblend it, and I'm trying not to over add pencil because I can just keep colouring for hours. And I do. Obviously I do. I did use a lot of blues here, but I have come in on the leaves with some green as well. But pretty much today's colours, all the cards, they're the same but different because I've cut them oddly. They're also the same but different because I've used very similar colours throughout the whole design, so it'd actually make a really nice little gift card set. And just be aware that colours look different on different colour cardstock. So if you can see there off to the side of the floral image, I am testing my colours on the cardstock before I actually colour them out. I know I'm going to be cutting this piece away, so you're not going to be seeing those. But that way I'm not sort of having to guess, because they're going to look different on white. And I really like how this is my favourite card out of all the ones today. Because I stamped this in the Misty, I could come back in and restamp the outline over top again, and it gives a nice bold outline. And then the same thing again, all I needed to do was come in and fussy cut the portion of the card that I want to be cut away. And I decided this time to add some blue on the inside of the card. I did toy with the idea of white, but I just don't think it looked quite as nice and bright. I did add a white sentiment. This is from the Hooray die set, and it says enjoy. And all these sentiments and the sequins I just adhered with some matte medium. And that's all 5 cards finished today. Thanks for watching, and remember there are lots of ways that you can connect with Penny Black. So don't forget to like today's video and subscribe to the Penny Black YouTube channel. Visit Penny Black on Facebook and Instagram, and also check out their blog and website. I've linked to all of those in the YouTube description below, along with a link to my personal blog for a listing of all the exact supplies used in making these cards. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Gimme 5, same but different cards with Penny Black, and I look forward to seeing you here next time. Bye!